welcome to another New Game Plus. This time we're talking Aviary Attorney, and this is a full-on spoiler cast. We're going to be diving into just all aspects of the game. So if you haven't played it already, I highly recommend you check it out and then come back here. We're not going anywhere. And it's a short game. It only take you a couple hours, and usually you can find it for pretty cheap on the Switch. Oh, nice. Bird puns galore here today, which really truly is in the spirit of this game, because this game is very punnyful.
Yeah.
Set during a very interesting historical period, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a bit here, in 1848 in France. You're playing as a bird attorney, of course, Aviary Attorney, come on. And it's obviously extremely inspired by Ace Attorney. I mean, even to the point that it's AA, right? It's very much inspired from that series. And we all played it and we absolutely loved it, right? I mean, I hope I'm not putting words in our mouth, but
Right. Or beak.
Right?
or beak. Yeah, shoving words out our beak. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to start maybe just going through a little bit about like what our initial takes on the game were, or like how we felt about it, or even Rick, how did you even find out about this game actually? Because you're the one who introduced this to me, and I think to Paula as well.
So this game came across I think it was, do you remember way back when Steam did like a discovery feed thing?
Yeah.
And in some of the older sale periods, like you had to go through your discovery feed to earn cards.
Oh, okay.
I think that's how this game came up to me when it was like newly released. And it wasn't very expensive, so I have a feeling I bought it either at or close to full price, which is unusual for me. And it grabbed my attention. It, for me, did what Ace Attorney does in a way that was much more palatable to me. So, long-time listeners of the podcast will know that Ace Attorney, as a series, for me, I just struggled to suspend my disbelief to the point that I can fully engage with those games. I totally get it. It's just not for me. What Aviary Attorney does is it packages it in a much smaller thing. The trials and the evidence gathering parts are much more concise. And because the whole system is like obviously corrupt, all the bollocks of the setup like feels internally consistent. And that just works for me. Plus it's funny as balls. And and the art is just so captivating. I feel like this is one that's worth jumping briefly back into. So this isn't actually something that they really drew themselves. They and by they I mean the developers, lent on the work of an artist called JJ Granville, and
which is where
what
the main
their
character's
Kickstarter
name comes from, right?
Nice, you know.
Yes, JJ,
Yep.
exactly, JJ Falcon. So I'm reading directly from the Kickstarter page here. After having to abandon traditional newspaper caricatures due to government censorship, Granville moved towards creating more whimsical and surreal lithographs for fiction writers. And among other works, he produced the bizarre drawings for, quote, the public and private life of animals. And what the devs did is they scanned artwork from those series, and that's what they've pulled together and manipulated and moved around to create the artwork for this game. And they also, it looks like, lent on a composer whose name I'm about to fucking butcher, Camille Saint-Saëns. I've absolutely balls that up. Let me share that link, Alex, and you can do a better job of pronouncing that than I ever did. And it explains, because it looks like there are only two like main devs on the team that made it, and the Kickstarter only raised about £19,000. But this is back in the days of Steam Greenlight, where there wasn't really as much of a publishing thing. Obviously, they didn't have as much to animate or compose, and the game is quite short to start with. So it feels like it was sort of bundled together on a shoestring, but in a way that's really, really cool. And I think that there is something of a scrapbook sort of pulled together air about this game, and there's something quite endearing about that as well.
Yeah, and you know, it reminds me what was it? It reminds me a lot of the Procession to Cavalry game, right? Like Cavalry in terms of how it's created.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And like they're like, you know, this one is more, it's, I wouldn't even call it black and white. It's more like black and beige, right? So it's like
monochrome,
that
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Whereas, you know, the Road to Cavalry has the Man, that is always so hard to say. I always want to say cavalry, but whatever.
Cavalry,
Yeah, it has like the different paintings that it's repurposed, whereas this one is using those kind of sketches and drawings. But yeah, it's very much in that same sense and same sort of, I would say, a very similar sense of humor in terms of those games as well.
For sure. And then obviously I brought it to our more recent attention by buying Paula a copy for Christmas. So that probably brings us neatly onto what you thought of the game when you played it, Paula.
First of all, the thing that stood out to me the most was the art.
Mhm.
And now that I know the origin of such art, I think it just fits the overall narrative and the overall setting of the game, and I find it just amazing. Especially like how they took the pictures of the various characters and manipulate them in a way that fit the game. Like I wouldn't have suspected that this wasn't like made for the game if you didn't brought it up. So kudos to the people in charge of that operation right there. As you already said, the humor of this game is amazing. Like the various puns, the various references. There was even like a stepladder reference that is usually like on the Ace Attorney series. And as you said, like the system was so clearly corrupted that we're already in spoiler territory, right? Okay. This is why we're naming it the spoiler because I'm sorry. The big moment where it was like it dawned on me that it wasn't gonna be like your regular Ace Attorney game. It was when you win the trial, and then you discover that the actual killer is the cat you defended, and that blew my mind to the point that I had to stop playing and just had to contemplate what I have done right there.
It's a phenomenal twist.
It was a phenomenal twist. I didn't get the good ending, and I forgot to look it up on YouTube. So, damn it! But at the very least, I
Well, I'll
can
fill
say
that
that
in later.
yeah, what I saw, like in the overall story, it was still very interesting and very like well done. So I enjoyed this game like through and through. So thank you very much, Rick.
You're very welcome. And Alex, you were prompted by us playing and talking about it to pick it up yourself and give it a play.
Yeah, I mean, I knew like the minute I was like, oh, I actually remember the first time I saw this game, I was like, well, I'm gonna buy that at some point. You know what I mean? Like it was like one of those things where I was like, yeah, obviously I'm gonna play this at some point. Like Ace Attorney is like one of my favorite series of all time, and I was like, oh, there's one about birds. Yeah, man. But it was because you guys were talking about it, and then like saw it on sale, and I have to say, like, what I want to fill in a little bit on this is like talk a bit about the history that the game is playing with, because it's actually playing with a really interesting period of time. And I will say it's totally fucking baloney in this game. Like it's all made up. None of this is even remotely like what actually happened. But
It's based on a true story kind of thing, basically.
hardly. It's more like based on an event is more what it is. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like based on an event happening in time. Because so to give you some idea, one of the big spoilers in the game, the twist, is that JJ Falcon is the grandson of Maximilien Robespierre, who, by the way, had no children. So already you're like, that's not true. But Robespierre is really important, right? I mean, that's the French Revolution. He's like one of the big spearheaders of. Often he gets labeled with like the terror and whatnot, but I always think that the big takeaway for the French Revolution is that like this is the first time really in Europe and particularly France where like the concept of no king happens. Like you could imagine, I mean, if we think today about like the way the US goes in and tries to like, screw up elections where countries are trying to become, more socialist, this is essentially what happens in this time. You have a country who's trying to become democratic, and so all the other countries in Europe are like, well, how about you go fuck yourself, because they all have kings, right? And they're like, I don't like this idea, and they successfully do that, right? Because like you get Napoleon who comes in at the tail end, and he rules until 1815 because he actually he invades all over, and he's trying to spread these kind of constitutional monarchies, but he's an emperor, so like there's still this authoritarianism in there. But he gets deposed, and then the king just comes back, right? Like you've got Louis the oh my god, which Louis is it who comes back?
16th question mark? Or is it 15th?
Yeah, because the King Louis the 16th is the one who was executed. I'm pretty sure it was King Louis the 17th. Yeah, who comes in. Yeah, because 16th is the one who's executed in France, and so 17 is the younger. It's a younger son of King Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette, and he yeah, and he becomes the Dauphin, right, which is like the heir to the throne. And he escapes, and then I'm pretty sure. No, I think he dies too. Oh God, I don't even know.
Let us know in the comments down below.
So hard to remember. No, it's the 18th. He's the one who becomes the king. Yeah, because a lot of the family dies, but he is the brother of King Louis the 16th. So yeah, anyway, sorry. This is like a little more history than you need to know, but the 16th, he's killed, his family's killed, Marie Antoinette dies, his children, bye-bye. And so after Napoleon gets deposed, he comes back for this constitutional monarchy, and he reigns until 1824. But it's his successor. Actually, it'll be after his successor, because you're going to have two successors. You'll have Charles the 10th, who's like around for like only like 6 years or so. And then you get Louis Philippe I, and that's the king in this game. And he was a real dude, and he also
Not
wasn't.
penguin.
Yeah, a real penguin. He kind of looks like a penguin if you look at photos. Anyway, he didn't last very long. Like, I mean, I guess he did a little bit, but when you think about it, like 1830 to 1848, but he had like really terribly mismanaged the country, and similar to like what was happening with the French Revolution, where like they had a few years where just like essentially it was climate caused, because like there was horrific weather that had essentially killed off crops within Europe, and so like prices of bread were absurd. Yeah, and people were just pissed at the king. Like it was just, and they were in all these wars overseas. Like they had so much debt, it was a nightmare. And similarly in 1848, things have been quite mismanaged. And so the people were, I'd say, pretty rightfully pissed, because they had gone from this period in time where they had like rights and like voting, and this point it was something like maybe 1% of the population held like franchise and like the ability to like vote and make decisions in the country. So like it had all been rolled back. And it started in Italy. Actually, there was a revolution in Italy in January of 1848, and then it rolls into France in February of 1848, and it actually will go all over Europe. Like kings and monarchies are going to be deposed all across the continent, Russia as well, like all over the place. You're seeing massive revolutions. What's interesting though is that in this game you have this big trial of King Louis, right? Which that never happened, but what actually happened is, I think, funnier. So King Louis knew what was fucking coming. He was like, shit. It was like not good. And he actually abdicates the throne, which he gets rid of it, and he gives it to his 9-year-old nephew. And he fucking leaves for England, and he lives there for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And dies in England. Yeah, so he basically goes like, hey, nephew, fuck you. Like shoves him under the bus. Puts this little 9-year-old, which I actually think would have been very, very funny to see a fucking
Baby
trial
penguin
of a
take the
9-year-old.
throne.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I would have played that.
But ultimately the monarchy gets just completely like overthrown and gotten rid of, and it becomes there's like a provisional government, but then you will never believe who comes in to take over the day. One of fucking Napoleon's grandkids, I think, or kids. I can't remember if it's grandkid or kid. But it's like Louis Napoleon or something Bonaparte, and he comes in and like, of course, calls himself emperor for life. Napoleon III, that was it. Yeah, Charles Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. He was the first president of France, right, from 1848 to 1852. But then he declares himself emperor for life and becomes emperor of France from 1852 to 1870.
Classic.
And he was a nephew
Classic.
and he's actually considered the last monarch of France. So he'll be the last one. After that, it turns into kind of more of the system that we know today. But it's like, so anyway, like all I knew is like, as I was starting this game and they were like, it says something like January, or maybe it was like, does it start in 1847? I can't remember. I feel like it
It's
starts
January 1848. It's like January 5th, January 6th.
Oh no, okay, it does start January.
Mid-Feb, yeah.
Yeah, and like when I saw that on the game when I started, I was like, oh yeah. Like I was like, I know we're about to hit fucking revolution time. So I just think that's a really bold, interesting idea of like setting a game in the midst of revolution. In particular, setting it in a time when like, yeah, like courts aren't what we know of today, right? Like the systems of laws, it's more like, I don't know. Okay, well, let's get into some fun stuff. But like when you think of nowadays, like most of us consider courts to be, the prosecution being the state, right? Like the government is whatever. The state is the prosecution. Defense is like the individual citizen. But it's like, it's a much different system at this point, right? Like the prosecution is not even really the state. It's just like the king, right? So you're like,
yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like there's not much defense when you're up for, like what do you, they don't really have burden of proof.
The modern problem, which is like, you are represented by the representation you can afford. And there is like a very, very class-based economic aspect of justice. And I think that's sort of played out in this where, what's his name? The fox, who you find out is not in fact the Prince of
Juan
Spain.
Creda, yeah.
Yeah.
Juan Herido, whatever. And
yeah.
it's like, why are you even trying to defend him? And it's like, well, that's my job. Like,
Herido, yeah.
Money or no. And I suppose that's the interesting difference then where with Lady Cataline, the first one, in theory, she could afford representation. She finds herself in a weird situation. It's like, I just need somebody. And it's less organized because it's less funded. Like you say, you're working against the might of the king and that whole structure. I think that's an interesting wrinkle. But then I think what makes it very, very different, and this, again, going back to what I said before, this is where I feel like it makes a bit more sense to me, Nate's Attorney. The judge always feels like, in the bits of those series that I've played, the judge feels like a weird sort of Deus Ex Machina where like they make decisions that allow the story to happen.
Yeah.
And that definitely sort of happens here too, but also like the judge in the second case is a corrupt fucker who pushed the previous judge into the river and took his clothes and became judge for the day. And then rocks up again as like a preacher on the run kind of thing. And the setup is just so bizarre and lacking any real direction. But again, that to a certain degree, that was the situation with courts at that time. They were very different to the rather rigid idea that we know today in the Western world.
Yeah, and
I feel like I very much meandered there, but yeah.
That's okay. I think something too that I find fascinating about this is like, okay, so like France at the time, like when we think about our pie in the sky concept of justice these days, right, is like the reformation of criminals. Arguably, do we do that? No, right? Like we're still pretty like punish. But looking at France, what's interesting is that like in the 1700s, France is all like torture convicts, right? Like it's about torturing, and this is like most of Europe at the time was like, let's punish them or kill them, right? And then the revolution comes along and they introduce this humanitarian thing called the guillotine, which I know sounds funny, but it kills you easier than anything else. So the idea was
it is more humane, which is a very, very low bar to clear. Yeah, so I take that point. Yeah,
but right. It was the humane way of killing someone because anyway, it was brutal back in the day, man. If you ever want to depress yourself, just read about like execution methods because we all think like, how hard is it to kill a person? And you're like, pretty fucking hard. You have to kill a lot of them in a row.
Yeah.
Mother of all that is holy. But anyway, so then after like the revolution introduces the idea of citizen judges, because the point was that the people should judge each other. Obviously, that goes away pretty quick when the monarchy comes back, and they're like, no, because the citizens would want me dead. But that's kind of like a revolutionary idea, right? And so like then the concept of juries coming around, and so we see juries in this game. So like it is a thing that is like around at this point, though juries had kind of limited power at that time, right? Like I still feel like the I don't know, the concept of justice was still like really, really loose, and like I feel like throughout the 1800s in general, like Europe was in this real like struggle between allowing citizens rights while still maintaining the king's role. You know what I mean? Like there's like this thing of where it's like, okay, well we should actually, because like we know that like citizens should have rights, and many citizens wanted rights, and they were like, if we don't give them rights, we're probably gonna have problems, which this revolution. This is also the revolution from Les Miserables, by the way.
Yes.
So if you like that musical and depressing movie, then that's oh actually yeah, this is it, yeah, because he published it like 20 years after, which is kind of oh no, sorry, that was the 1832 rebellion, so ignore me, that's wrong. There were many revolutions and rebellions in France.
Are you telling me that we made a mistake about history on this video game podcast?
I know, right? There you go. It's just the stupid dates. I can never remember the freaking dates right. But actually, the storming that you see in this, like where they're coming up against the like courtroom, that is actually like fairly similar to what happens in the actual revolution. I gotta say, them French, they love storming stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just fun because like when you think about Ace Attorney, and sorry, I know I'm talking way too much on this, but we just got into history and this is my jam. But like
it's okay.
Yeah, you're like, it's cool. I told them they're gonna carry later episode for me, so I'm gonna carry this one a little bit. But when you think of Ace Attorney, right, like they're talking about like that game was sort of critiquing the foibles and the flaws of the Japanese judicial system, right, where it says that it really, really favors the prosecutors, to the point of where it's like, because like I don't know, when you think of American, I'd say British and Canadian to an extent, obviously there's difference, but particularly in American, like the concept these days is that like the burden of proof lies with the prosecution, right? But I think the real like thing in Japan that they were critiquing is that it actually seems more like the defense has to prove they're innocent. And there's an assumption that the prosecution is right, which seems like that kind of inverse of the concept, right? Like it should be the prosecution who have to work hard to prove that you did the crime.
I think that's what I struggle with those games, because it just felt dumb. And I think the
critique of Japan, yeah.
And exactly. I get that point, but it's also in the sense of like almost a righteous indignation, like. I suppose I would compare it to when a game is asking you to do something in a stupidly short time window, or when like unrealistic things are asked of you. It's just like, oh, come on. Like it felt unjust. And I get that that's the point, but also I didn't
I mean, that's fair. You know, like if it doesn't resonate, that's just, that's fine. Like that happens, right?
But I take the point. Yeah, for sure.
But it's sort of like, I think it makes sense why, right? Like it's kind of like when you look at it in that sense, I think it makes more sense. And it's probably why. I also think maybe something that helps with it is that, and actually I think this could be a flaw of Ace Attorney's localization, right? I think that might be the problem, is that because they tried to make it seem like it's an American thing when they localized it, I think that's an issue. Like had it simply stayed, because that's actually where I think the Great Ace Attorney succeeds, is that it's very clear that you are a Japanese person in Britain, and so the system that's like, it feels more legitimate. And also because what you're talking about with like in this game, whereas we know it's a corrupt system, when you're going there, you know, as you're entering Britain in like the 1800s, that you're entering a corrupt system. You know what I mean? Like you're like, this is an imperial, like an empire right now. I have a strong feeling their judicial system isn't like super fair, you know? So it kind of like makes more sense. So yeah, I think I can see what you're saying, where there'd probably be a flaw to those early ones that this game kind of avoids. Anyway, sorry. Okay. that's long of it. So why don't we hear a little bit like what were some of the endings that people got? Because I know I got what I think is considered the good ending.
I technically got all three.
Hmm.
However, when I did the replay, I got the B ending, which is the one where the king has the trial,
Yeah.
is banished
Yes.
and like runs away, and then like you have the whole aftermath. But I remember I want to say the C ending,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually just want to pick your brain on the historical aspect of it quickly.
Oh yeah.
You find out in that ending that JJ is in fact someone called the Viridian Killer.
Oh yeah.
That's the one
Is
I
that
got.
historical, or is that just something they pulled out of their ass?
I don't know. I think they just pulled out of their ass, to be honest with you.
That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I've never heard of something that could be a thing. You know what I mean? Like it could be.
Fair.
But I actually don't know if I've ever heard of something like that. I mean, let's be real here. There is almost certainly a serial killer in France at some point. You know what I'm saying? But
No, I don't believe it.
what I think is more likely is that there's Larry Butts has a big running joke about the color Viridian in Phoenix, right? In the Trials and Tribulations game, and I'm almost certain that that's probably an Easter egg for Ace Attorney.
That could make a lot of sense, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one do you get, Paula? Because you said you'd only got the one ending.
Yeah, I got the Viridian Killer ending where this person ended up like uh stopping everything and like doing the defense and everything because JT just didn't believe in the judicial system anymore and was like, I'm done with this, bye. And then he came back as a very young killer, and I was like, holy. That's the ending I got. I actually found interesting that they let you like just walk off the whole thing and end up with oh my god, the rooster. I forgot the name of the rooster, but
Severin. Cocorico.
yeah, Kakariko. You could just walk off and let Kakariko die, and I'm like, or like be tortured. I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe they actually let you do that.
And that choice spoiler is how you get all the endings. What happens immediately before and sometimes during that trial is entirely what determines which ending you get.
Yeah.
But I think that speaks to a broader success of the game, I think, which is that rather than the trials being like an obstacle that you have to overcome, the trials are a means to tell the narrative. And
Yeah.
if you succeed or if you fail, those aren't like win and fail states. They are just branches and different directions in which the game can go. Like with the Catalina example that we talked about at the beginning, where it turns out she's the killer. If you fail to defend her, you don't find out, oh, that was the right choice because actually she did do it after all. You assume that you failed. And then the story goes in broadly the same direction, but JJ's now carrying this extra guilt with him. And I think that's a really interesting approach.
Wait, I didn't know you can actually like fail that trial, like
Oh yeah, you can absolutely fail that trial.
like going with the red herring or something like that.
I just by failing to like hit all the points in terms of defending her.
I see.
You can just fudge the defense, and then what happens there is you never explicitly find out what's going to happen to her, but it's heavily implied that she gets the humane guillotine.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like, again, France at this point has gone back to it's murder. You just get killed when you commit a crime like murder.
Yeah.
Interestingly
Classic.
enough, when I was thinking about the serial killer stuff, another reason why I think there likely wasn't anything is just because, like, honestly, the term serial killer is like a modern term anyway. So, like, I don't even think they would. I don't even know how they would have labeled it. Like, there is one person recorded
Killer
in the
serial.
1830s,
No.
whose name Hélène Jégado, so she's a lady
What?
who she killed like 23 to 36 people with arsenic, because she was a domestic servant and she'd rob her employers and poison them. And she poisoned
Oh my
between
God.
1833 and 1841, and then her final spree was in 1851. But she was caught and guillotined that year, and she was only like, so they had a statute of limitations at this point, by the way, which is wild for murder, which I'm like, that's insane that there was a statute of limitations, but it had run out on the other ones. So she was only charged for 3 murders and 3 attempts. And so, but I'm like, that's insane. I was like, how do you have a statute of limitations for murder? You can tell what a society is like, that there are many revolutions and like lots of deaths if they put a goddamn statute of limitations on murder. Like, they're like, oh no, but that was 10 years ago. It's fine. You know, like, mother of God.
It's also much of a muchness. Like, yeah, she only got charged for 3, but what were they going to do? Guillotine her twice?
I know, right? Like, ultimately, they're just like,
True.
we found out way too late anyway. Let's just kill her. You're like,
Oh man.
but yeah, I do think like it's interesting. I like that the game. I think ultimately, like, because I talked about this too when we were going on, just like talking about the game at first, is like I didn't love the 3 endings thing that much, only because there's just not a lot of an impetus to play again to get the other ones, and also I think I just prefer. I don't know. I just didn't. It made the game feel even shorter in a way. You know what I mean? Like, I was kind of like, oh, I actually love this so much that I would have preferred a little more game instead of all the different endings. But I respect the kind of the concept behind it, and I am also glad that the endings are so wildly different. I think that's pretty cool. You go for it, but it's like, you know, when I beat it, I was like, I think I'm good. You know.
Totally get that.
Yeah.
I definitely felt that way in my second pass, but then like I'd played all the endings already. So I was just like, for these purposes, I'm happy with whatever ending I get, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
And it is a short game. It definitely bears repeating. It's like 3 proper trials.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean,
Yeah.
there's like that, you know, impromptu trial, which is very important. The one that you hold with the prosecutor, who you could just have killed. It's like, dear God.
I would almost call that a half trial though, because you
Yeah.
don't really do any prep for it. It's just what you happen to have, and depending on which storyline you do, you don't play it. So
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
3.5 trials. Let's go with a half trial.
Yeah, and the investigation is so important. The one thing I do love about this game is how flexible they are with you repeating investigation moments. Like, I definitely went through at one point and I was like, oh, this is clearly a bogus storyline and I'm just wasting investigation days, so I could just back up on the map and be like, all right, I'm going to start this one. You know what I mean? Because I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's a really handy feature, instead of locking me out and just being like, too bad you picked this. I just like that they allow you to kind of go and just select all you want. And I'm very happy that I got the red herring achievement, because that was very fun.
Remind me what that is, because I didn't do it my second pass and it like slipped my mind.
You present the red herring at one point, and they'll like ask you like, are you seriously going to pursue this line of questioning? And you're like, yes, I am. And you like go through it like and do this thing on the red herring, and then it's just like they just shut you down pretty hard. They're like, it's a fish. You're like, oh, I'm sorry. And you just get like made fun of, and then you get something where it's like pursue the red herring or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. Yeah.
I should have pursued the red herring.
It's pretty funny.
I love that energy throughout. There's like such a genuine enthusiasm to some of the humor.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Like
your
the bits
little
where they go to
accomplice
approach
is
someone with
insane.
tact, and yeah, Sparrowson just pouts up and he's like, not Sparrow. Is it Sparrowson? Yes, JJ
Yes,
Falcon
it's
and
Sparrowson.
Sparrowson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Sparrowson's just a vibe.
Oh,
I love it.
absolutely. He's like pure chaos.
Yes, and I love how part of the evidence, he got part of the evidence by smelling chocolate.
Yes. He's a key
It was
witness.
beautiful. And when he ate the wrapper, I was like, Sparrow, so for fuck's sake, why are you like this? I mean, we got the evidence, but you almost died there, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think my favourite humour was definitely the librarian though. I just love how he got worn down with their stupid questions. Every interaction was just like, yes, here we go. Trying to remember what else there was.
Oh, when you had the option to break into the photographer's like house,
Oh
and
yeah. And did we talk about the pot already?
No.
the pot, the one from the it was the kangaroo.
Well, I was thinking from the museum where you can steal the copper pot. So you could buy a pot from a kangaroo, but you can
Wait, you can
instead.
steal it?
That's what
Oh
I
yeah, I
did.
stole the pot. Yeah.
Same. I didn't want to pay, so I just went to the museum and stole it. And I was like, "You
And
just take a
Sebastian starts
precious
looking
pot."
around. He's like, "What else can we steal?" It's like, no, this is enough.
I didn't know you could steal it.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
you don't have to buy fishing wire either. You can trick the kingfisher into basically giving you his.
Mhm.
Like the bullet pulling device, you actually don't need to spend a franc on.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I think that's something they underused, to be fair, the money system in the game. Like it popped
Yeah.
up a couple of moments, but it didn't really serve a massive thing in the plot. Like I think you need some depending on what ending you get to get the information from the fox, whatever his actual name is. Or whatever his name associates.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. The Foxes. I forget the Foxes. Yeah, the private detective agency.
Mhm.
yeah, but I think other than that, I think that's the only thing you actually need money for.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's just this weird superfluous sort of appendage on the game systems. But
Yeah.
it also doesn't really get in the way. Oh, and can we mention the Facebook as well?
Oh yeah, the face. That's
Yeah,
pretty
the
funny.
Facebook.
I made a
I love that
Facebook.
little humor.
I played a lot of the blackjack minigame. I don't know. I just wanted that money. It was very fun. Like they just have a blackjack game in this that you can make money in if you need to make money for anything. That's pretty fun, honestly. Like because I don't know, I'm always down for a little thing of blackjack. One nice thing
I
too is
spent like
that
half an hour there.
yeah, I definitely spent time. And when I saw it, I went, oh shit, I'm gonna spend time on this. But yeah, I think overall, like it's. I would love to see more games inspired by Ace Attorney, honestly, because like it's just so fun to kind of get a little bit of a glimpse into a different kind of world setting for it. And I love this sort of maybe I don't know if it's just a trend these days, but there seems to be more and more like historically set games, particularly in this like I'm thinking of Professor Cavalry, I'm thinking of Aviary Attorney, even at some of the other Professor Cavalry games. I probably should have came up with more examples before I said this, but I know there are others out there. And it's just I really dig this kind of and I don't know what's making it easier to do this or something. Like I don't know if maybe just like editing tools are so easy now to like edit and like recreate from already taken images. Like maybe we're just getting so good at this now that it's like an easier prospect to do. But um I don't know. I just love it. I want to see more of this. I'm just like, yes, take old, incredibly weird and wonderful art and make games out of it, please, because I'm fucking loving it.
For sure. I mean,
Mhm.
I suppose it's tricky because I'm skimming through the book now. There's a scan of it available free on a public domain website that I will make sure that we sort of put in the description for anyone that does want to go and look into it. There's not that many drawings. I mean, I'm actually quite impressed that they've managed to pull as many characters as they have from the limited settings that there are that you can sort of pull them in such a way that they're usable.
Mm.
But I think more than that, and this is something that you've hinted at when we've spoken about it before, Alex, I think this sort of highlights the difficulty in building a big Ace Attorney game and just how much work is involved in scripting and blocking and making everything fit together. Because this is a game that didn't cost loads, but it clearly costed enough. And it's like a little 3-hour thing with one key decision.
Yeah, which is why it's like when you think about I don't know, when I'm playing this, it made me appreciate the Ace Attorney games more because I'm like, holy shit, like they're like, 24, 30 hours usually long. And it's like, holy hell, like,
And with far more moving parts as well. I think that bears
Yeah.
highlighting.
yeah. And it's also why I think, yeah, sometimes they're a little more structured. Like, there's only really a specific way to get through the games, but like that's also part of the joy of them. They're kind of like those find the thing games, right? Like the I Spies and stuff in some ways, right? Like their investigations are kind of like find the objects and then
Mm.
have the right conversations. Now use the right items in the right moments and like that kind of deal, which I also think the strength of that is that they control the pacing significantly better. So like Aviary Attorney's pacing isn't that important because it's so short. And I think that's actually like probably one of the reasons why they, besides it being complicated, it's actually kind of in their benefit that it's a short game, because if they're giving you so much freedom to go where you want, there's not really any guarantee. I find, especially with like different endings, that like you're going to be hitting those highs at the same times. And like you can kind of argue it's similar to like that Ace Attorney as well, particularly in the investigation scenarios. But the trials are just so much longer in the Ace Attorney games that you can kind of structure those highs a little more. Whereas I find in Aviary Attorney, the trials are very, very quick. But I did like their system of like seeing the like, and usually in Ace Attorney you're like scrolling through statements, and then you could press them or you could present. But in this one it was neat because they would show you just like an entire statement a person made, and then you would just select the keywords, which I was like, that's pretty cool actually.
I did like that setup.
Yeah.
I also think it almost works for the game that it's short, because it's and this is something that indies so often really, really nail, and more some bigger games are starting to lean into. Just a more concise package. Guerrilla tactics, like gets in, does its thing. All right, go and move on with your day, like crack on with whatever else you want to do. I think there's something really strong to be said for that setup by contrast, and I think it does really well for that.
Yeah, I also don't know if this game could hold over a longer period. Like, I don't know if the characters are enough of characters. Like, I love them, but they're also very
how much more slack is there? I totally get that.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because they're so hammy. So there is that question of where it's like, I don't know how much more of a game we could put into this if we were to extend these jokes like this much further. So to me, it does feel like the perfect package. Like it's just the right amount there.
Yeah, it isn't like neither too short. It doesn't overstay its welcome either. So it's just perfect in that regard.
And speaking of the perfect amount, is that the perfect amount for this episode? Is there anything else anyone wants to throw in terms of final thoughts? I feel like I've said everything I wanted to say. I'll be real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here. I don't think I want to add anything else.
Yeah.
If we go too much longer, we're going to be, like a third of the game. So I think we have to
Touche.
Hold there. But yeah, I mean, basically that's our thoughts on Aviary Attorney. It's a fantastic game. Highly, highly recommend checking out, especially if you like the Ace Attorney series. But even if you don't, like Rick, not a fan, he still loved it. So give it a shot. You can get it on Switch. You can get it on any of the main consoles, I believe, PC, Steam. Yeah, it's all over.
I know it's on Steam and Switch. I don't know about the other ones.
Yeah, maybe I'm talking out my arse.
At the very least, Steam and Switch.
Yeah,
and possibly at most.
Definitely on Windows, Linux, Mac, and Switch. Nothing else.
Oh dear. All the main ones.
All right. Toodaloo, folks. Thanks for tuning in.
Take it easy.